Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire.
Happy Tuesday and welcome back to the Dynasty HeatSeekers. Folks, don't be alarmed. It's week one. We finally made it. The offseason is over. Winter is come and gone for the NFL, and we have arrived to it's week one. It's a good time, though. It is a great time to be a Heat Seeker. We've got a lot of great things going on here at Roto Heat, and we thank you guys for hanging out with us on a Tuesday night. This week is going to be getting you ready for week one. We got a lot of news. We got a lot of notes. We got a familiar face if you were with us last year, though. We have brought back probably one of the most enjoyable people in the Roto Heat team. I love having conversations with Leone because he never really agrees with me, and I love that. So, Anthony, how are you, brother? Welcome back, and it's good to see you. How are you?
Yeah, it's good to see you guys. I'm glad to be back, and I'm happy to share a different perspective for some other viewers out there.
And if you guys heard that, that's Zach Moss just showing up. Rob Sullivan, how are you, buddy?
I'm great. How are you?
I am very, very, very excited. We finally made it.
I think people need to head to rotoheat.com and check out all the great written content that Anthony has been adding to our website as well. So
yes.
Multi-layers of talent on this man that we have with us.
He is the onion of Roto Heat. There's always another level behind him.
Well, I might cry tonight, so you never know. That might be apropos.
Reunited, and it feels so good.
Doesn't it?
So it's always fun to have these conversations. Now, obviously, we are in regular season mode, so we are back to the regular season schedule. Monday night, you didn't see us because it was the holiday. The IDP show is off for the season, but in like 30 minutes, you can see my boy Craig Reith helping out with the Gridiron Ratings guys here on YouTube. So make sure you show those guys some love and go pop in the chat and ask Craig all sorts of crazy questions. And it's definitely a fun time for him as well. He's doing a lot with them, and he's doing a lot with us. So check out his written content on rotoheat.com with Rob and Anthony. Sometimes I do something on the site, but that's not often anymore because you're typically staring into my face on YouTube. So we've got a lot going on there. Tomorrow night is our redraft show as well. So we are getting back to that with Bryce and I. And I think Rob will be on tomorrow helping out until I can find a third. But
Am I on tomorrow night? Super.
I don't remember. I think
I only have 3 drafts going at the same time, so why not?
You got nothing better to do on a Wednesday night. So with that being said, if you guys have questions, make sure you get them in the comments. We will have that conversation and chat with you and help you out, get you ready for week one. But we got other stuff going on. What's going on in the news and notes, Mr. Sullivan?
Well, we'll start off in New Orleans, where a few hours ago they announced that they were releasing running back Latavius Murray. The Saints apparently asked him to take a pay cut. He declined, and thus he was released. So he's coming off his best season last year. What did he do? He averaged 4.5 yards per carry and 7.7 yards per reception. So I guess this question now is, Anthony, what does this mean for the New Orleans backfield? What are they doing?
I think the Saints have faith in Tony Jones. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made this move. So I think if you already had Tony Jones on the back of your roster, you should feel good about it.
Yeah.
If you can still get him, I think you got to do it. It's Tuesday night. A lot of leagues are on waivers tonight. See if he's out there. I think he's a great ad. And I just think obviously Kamara is the backfield and he's going to dominate the touches. But as we've seen in the past with Latavius Murray, they do get other guys involved. And I think this just shows they have faith in Tony Jones moving forward. Brad?
When I first saw the news pop through, I'm like, man, is New Orleans trying to push for a top 10 pick in the draft next year? Like, why are they getting rid of everybody on their team? The thing for me is, and I think Tony Jones provides kind of the most appeal in this conversation outside, obviously, of Kamara, because I could see the situation where New Orleans moves Kamara outside to play receiver more. And Tony Jones is now your back in the backfield. So you could see them both on the field at the same time. I mean, what else are they going to do? Obviously, we know what's going on with Michael Thomas, Callaway, Traquan Smith, Lil Jordan Hemphrey. I mean, like, those aren't names that are really striking fear in the hearts of defenses. So I'm really excited for the running backs in this equation. And don't be surprised if Dwayne Washington gets involved somehow. They've had him on the team for a while for a reason. As a Lions guy who was here when he was drafted, I don't know what that reason is. I mean, he's very fast, but that's really all he's got going for him. So it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. I think obviously the offense has to go through Kamara like that. This guy, as long as he's healthy, he's probably RB1 and probably one of the top fantasy options this year, just because he has to be all the fantasy production. I mean, like he's the most talented player on the field now. So it's an interesting conversation. Latavius Murray seemed to be a fine fit with them. I don't know why he wouldn't have stayed. He got plenty of action, at least, for his value at that point. But what do you think, Mr. Sullivan?
I think it's very interesting, and I think Anthony is correct. You must buy into the asset that Tony Jones is, or you wouldn't make this move. You look at Sean Payton's history in New Orleans. He's always had multiple running backs that he's used. So I don't think Alvin Kamara, number one, is going to get all the work. Number two, I'm not sure he can handle all the work. You have Traquan Smith's hurt, so he's probably not even going to play to start the season. I think Deontay Harris is wide receiver 2 right now with little Jordan Humphrey, who I really want to become something, so I could say little Jordan every week. That'd be fun.
Throw up those horns, you Texas fans.
Totally. But Dwayne Washington is the old Packer. Ty Montgomery still kicking around down there?
He is.
So who knows, right? Like there'll be a lot of different things that go on down there. And Tony Jones is exciting in the preseason, no doubt about it. And the Saints still have a decent offensive line. So I think that he is absolutely, to Anthony's point, if he's available in your league, go get him. If you're doing a redraft this week, he's a nice later round, 13th, 14th, 15th round pickup.
Yeah.
The kid's got potential, and he looks good, and he can catch the ball as well. So he's kind of a very light Alvin Kamara. So I'm interested to see what happens there. Sticking with the running back theme, Baltimore doesn't like them. In fact, they beat them up so much that they can't play football anymore. So we all know that we lost J.K. Dobbins for the season with a torn ACL. We just learned that we lost Justice Hill to a torn Achilles. They announced today that they added Le'Veon Bell to their practice roster. Is Latavius Murray the next running back that the Baltimore Ravens add, Brad?
I really thought Todd Gurley was going to be on there before Le'Veon Bell. If I had to guess a veteran running back that made the team. I mean, in my mind, none of them are really very attractive options. I think Gus is clearly the number one still, just because he knows the system and he does a good job when given the opportunity. The stats will show you. It works out better for him when Gus gets the ball out of the guys that are there. And yes, Craig, Justice Hill is not – I don't agree with that. All right, Craig. Obviously, missing Monday night together means you've gone mad. Justice Hill, I didn't mind, but I definitely wouldn't put him above Trey Sermon. I mean, for me, my money's on Gus Edwards, and then I really like the Tyson kid.
Me too.
I pulled some of his BYU stuff and was looking at there. He looks intriguing. He's can be a bit of a power back and do some of the things that they need him to do. So for me, it feels like these guys would be depth pieces in my mind. So it's like these are your top two, and then everything else is going to just kind of filter in. What do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I mean, I think they just need the extra depth. And I mean, shoot, we haven't even had a game yet, and they've had 2 running backs go down. So
right,
what's going to happen? What's going to happen when the next one goes down? So they're just preparing for what if and what's going to happen going forward. And I agree with everything else you guys have already touched on the subject.
I guess the bigger question is, how does the Lamar Jackson factor into this equation, Rob? Are they going to still try to stick with he's not going to run as much and be more of a pass guy? What's your feeling on what this offense needs to do now with all these injuries?
I think it's very intriguing because Lamar needs a contract too, right? So this is a contract year for Lamar Miller. Maybe they'll bring him in. Lamar Jackson, I think he has to run more, right? You look at Gus Edwards, he's pretty much averaged 5 yards a carry and ran for 700 yards every season. He scored 2 touchdowns his first 2 seasons and I think 4 last year. So he's a nice running back and he's a good running back, but he's not going to bell cow it up for you. That's another team that has always had a committee. So I do believe that Tyson Williams is going to get a fair shot. Le'Veon Bell's going to be around. It's an odd signing to me that you would sign a primarily pass catching running back when you don't throw to your running backs. So that's interesting. But yeah, Lamar has to run more. I think the biggest winner here still is Mark Andrews. He just keeps winning all offseason. Every running back and every wide receiver around there is falling by the wayside, and it's just him and Lamar and Gus. So I don't know. I know they improved their defense, but they might be in for a bit of a rough start to the season.
Well, do you think so? I mean, they're starting off with the Raiders, who are.
Wow, I didn't
Who knows
mean like
what they are.
I didn't mean just week one, and I don't know what their
Okay.
schedule looks like off the top. No, they'll thump the Raiders on Monday night. I pretty much guarantee that. Sticking with the theme of running backs, let's talk a little Saquon Barkley. Looks like he's trending in the right direction. He is going to reportedly play in week one. What is very interesting when I looked at the Giants' schedule is they play 3 times in 14 days to start this season. So do we anticipate that Saquon Barkley, coming off of a significant knee injury less than a season ago, Anthony, is going to have his normal workload, or are we going to see some other backs on the field for the Giants?
If you have him, you have to start him.
Oh, I agree with that.
So, I think they're going to limit his touches? Yeah. I mean, probably a little bit here and there. But at the same time, if you have him, you're starting him. So just hope for the best. Hope he doesn't get hurt again. I think they're going to do their best to make sure his reps aren't into the high 20s or anything insane. But no, I mean, if you have him, you got to start him and just hope for the best.
Yeah. It's such a tough situation because the Giants are just a mess in the coaching staff side of things. When you look at their depth chart behind Saquon, who do you trust to really help offset the workload? I mean, Devontae Booker's kind of just never been. You can't even call him a has-been because he never got the opportunity. And then
even when he had the opportunity, he never.
I don't know. He looked pretty good when he got his shot for the Raiders last year.
Yeah, he looked okay, but he didn't. When he had his opportunity with Broncos, he didn't do much with it either.
True.
So, and then you got what like Brightwell. I think Gary Brightwell is the only other back on the roster right now. It seems like they have to get Saquon heavily involved because we're still trying to figure out if Daniel Jones is a thing for them. I mean, they have to lean on the running game to set up the pass. It almost feels like that's a necessity. So Saquon, I mean, as long as he's good and by all accounts he's fine, then it feels like they're just going to let him go and let him run with it because they have to. I mean, he's still the most talented player on this offense.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because it's Pro Football Focus's worst offensive line in the NFL. So I guess that's one of the reasons Kyle Rudolph's in town. So you run 2 tight end sets. I don't know who the other tight end will be because it looks like Evan Ingram is going to miss the start of the season as well.
Right.
They're beat up. They're beat up everywhere. Slayton's hurt. Galladay's limping as usual. Kadarius Toney had COVID / soft tissue injuries. It's a team that's terrible. I don't know. I guess you're right. I guess you just have to give the ball to Saquon and hope that he is Saquon again and can rejuvenate what was a promising career in his rookie season. He was probably one of the best things we've ever seen. And then he's had some unfortunate setbacks the last couple of seasons. But there's nothing around Saquon Barkley in that offense that really helps him. And I think, we've seen running backs behind bad offensive lines do well. Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook. But there was weapons in those offenses that could deter defenses from throwing 10 guys on one player. I don't know if you can do that in New York. So I agree. You have Saquon Barkley on your roster. You're absolutely 1,000% putting him in your starting lineup. Yeah. I'm just a little nervous if I am. That's all.
Well, and for the Giants, the way that they help Saquon is some of these speedier guys actually make the defenses become a little bit more honest and have to play a little bit further back. They went after Kadarius Toney because of his deep speed and some of the deep playmaking ability he's supposed to have. Don't know if I agree if it's a great idea or not, but That's what they went with. So they have to make defenses become a little bit more respecting. They have receivers that have at times been really nice options. Slayton's had his run and he's still young enough that he could. Sterling Shepard's always been Sterling Shepard, but the injuries are there. Kenny Galladay, same thing. Injuries have been the issue for him. So this team could become, a team that allows Barkley to not have stacked boxes on every play, but they get, Jones has to be able to get that ball to those guys and make defenses be concerned about it. And so far that just hasn't happened. And I don't know if it will happen.
And that's how you play the Giants, right? You just stack the box and let Daniel Jones try to beat you. I figure. Like I would. I don't know anything about defense. So
neither does Anthony. So
that's what you would do. That's what you would do. And like to Brad's point, I mean, they got some speedy guys to try, but they're not going to have to really do much to stop Daniel. They're not worried about Daniel Jones. So
Right.
So we do have a bunch of questions that have been coming in. We got some here. We got some here that are asking about their teams. We got a couple that are kind of rating their teams or ranking their teams. What do you think about it? So MPX over on YouTube wants to know, what do you think of this team? He's got Hurts at quarterback. He's got Antonio Gibson and David Montgomery, obviously, and then a wide receiver, Keenan Allen, Robert Woods, Amari Cooper, and then Travis Kelce. This must be his starting lineup. I'm assuming probably a week 1 type starting lineup. How do you guys feel about it? And I'll start with you, Mr. Leone. How do you feel about this lineup? If you're starting
if that's a 12-team league, I feel really good about it. If it's a 10-team league, then I'm a little worried about it. But I mean, I think it's a good team. You know, you got the running backs, you got the wide receivers, you got tight end, obviously Travis Kelce. Hurts, I think, provides a lot of upside. That's good. So again, 12-team, that's great. 10-team, not feeling it.
Mr. Sullivan.
Well, I agree. The bigger the league, the better this team. I'm not so sure I'm poo-pooing it in a 10-team league because I think you have a top 12 quarterback, potentially 2 top 12 running backs, a top 12 wide receiver or 2, and the best tight end in football. So I think in any format, it's a pretty darn good starting lineup.
Very good team.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. It's got a lot of promise to it. Especially week 1. What does Philadelphia's got? Atlanta. So that should be a very easy matchup for Hurts to be at worst a back end QB1 because we know Atlanta's defense is extremely soft and vulnerable. So there you go. Good job, MPX. Good luck this week.
Absolutely.
Next up, over on YouTube, Justin wants to know thoughts on my team. 10-team PPR. So this is a 10-team, true 10-team here.
Settle down.
I'm ready.
we got Stafford. I'm assuming that's Trey Lance, so would be his backup.
It's got to be super flex, I think.
Potentially, but if it's super flex, then Lance may not be a great option because he's not starting yet, right?
No.
Okay, Fields week 2, he'll be fine.
Fields. RBs are Aaron Jones, James Robinson, Javonte Williams, Rojo. He's got Tyreek, Justin Jefferson, A-Rob, DJ Moore, Waddle, Gallup. He's got Pitts. Oh, we know Sullivan loves this team already.
Yeah.
Defensive special teams is Patriots kickers Daniel Carlson. What are we thinking about this team, Mr. Leone?
I love this team. Like what you said, if it's a super flex, that would kind of worry me having just Lance and Fields to back up Stafford. If it's a 1 QB league, he said it's a 1 QB league. This is a phenomenal team. Even in a 10-team league, but you have
1 team. Yep.
And you got Lance and Fields to back up in case Stafford, which I think Stafford's going to have a great season. So you don't even really need those two.
Week 1 would be an interesting challenge though, facing Chicago and that defense that knows all too well about shutting Stafford down. I know Stafford very well.
This isn't 1985.
I would say to Justin, if he can trade Lance or Fields in a 10-team league, I would do that now while you can.
So Anthony, you hit on the point that I was going to go to, but what I would do is I would wait till about week 2 or week 3, and I would trade Matthew Stafford because I think that he has the quarterback depth with Justin Fields on this team with that supporting team to go and do some damage. And don't worry about your DST and your kicker. Just stream those all year long.
Right.
Believe it or not, you might need another tight end. I absolutely adore Kyle Pitts, the dynasty asset. I'm a little concerned in a redraft format, or at least in this season. But you're loaded everywhere. The wide receivers are great. The running backs very solid. Especially the wide receiver depth. It's amazing.
And his next question is, should I pick up Michael Carter? So Michael Carter from the Jets must be available.
You'd cut from this list, though.
I mean, at that point, you try to trade one of those quarterbacks. Like if you don't like Lance, Fields, I'm not moving. If in any format, as much as I don't like the Bears, Justin Fields is not touchable for the most part, unless it's a crazy deal. Because I think I was wrong about him. He probably should have been in conversation for QB1 in this rookie class.
Agree. And if Michael Carter is on waivers, I will take the assumption that this is a redraft league. And with the way that Michael Carter was used in the preseason, coming out as the 4th running back, I don't think he stays in that role, but I wouldn't be in a hurry to go and get Michael Carter because I think it's going to be a slow build for him, and you'll see him gain a little bit more traction in that offense as the season progresses. So if you have a roster spot, if you have a bench spot somewhere other than the players that you've listed that you'd rather have Michael Carter, absolutely go and make that move. But don't feel the need to do it now, because I don't think a whole lot of people are going to be running to the waiver wire for Michael Carter come this time next week.
Yeah. And Justin, I will let you know, rotoheat.com, we're pumping out a ton of weekly kind of start sit conversations. And I know I'm doing specifically defense and special teams. So if you do need to stream them, I will have, the ones to start and the ones to sit each week. Make sure you go over there and check that out.
Hey, we also have a 3 tight ends, 3 quarterbacks, 3 kickers, 3 DST to stream each week articles. And you and I, sir, will be doing the waiver wire show on Sunday nights.
So make sure you keep it locked in here. All right, our main man, Kevin Kloss, the man, the myth, the Kloss, has a question. Are you comfortable if Calvin Ridley is your wide receiver 1? Anthony?
100%. No doubt in my mind. I think if he stays healthy, he could easily get 100 catches this year. Who else are they going to throw the ball to? We mentioned Pitts, but, other than that, So, Calvin Ridley is wide receiver 1 all day. I have no issues with that at all. Sully, what do you think?
I think any wide receiver that has the ability and the upside to be the wide receiver 1, you should be comfortable with as your wide receiver 1. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if Calvin Ridley finishes atop the wide receiver scoring in fantasy this year.
Yeah, I feel good about Ridley. You've seen him plenty of times be able to beat double coverage. My concern, obviously you have to be concerned if teams really start to not be afraid of anybody but him and they start to triple, and really, really focus on him. That would be where I would be concerned. But right now I have no concerns. He has no problem beating double coverage is just fine. And he's
my only concern is Matt Ryan falls off a cliff. And I don't think that's really going to happen yet. But for this season, man, fire him up. Yeah, I think that's Kloss just coming in here to brag that he has Calvin Ridley on his fantasy team.
So read over on Twitter. Must be over on Twitter. Jets depth chart didn't even have Michael Carter listed. Kind of scary. Best to wait on him. So I love Michael Carter long term. In a dynasty format, he has to be on your roster in some way, shape, or form. But he's definitely, like you said, slow burn.
Oh, man, Josh is in here tonight.
Oh, look at that. We were just talking about FYF a little bit ago. Our favorite fantasy guys. Josh, it's good to see you, brother. And he goes between Ridley and Hopkins. Must be his wide receiver 1. Between Ridley and Hopkins, his wide receiver 1. So
makes sense.
Those are all the main questions at the moment. What is the next piece of news that we want to talk about, Mr. Sullivan?
I just have a question. You know how I've been pretty jazzed about this rookie quarterback class all preseason. So Mac Jones versus Miami, Zach Wilson versus Carolina, Trevor Lawrence versus Houston. Anthony, who has the best week 1 out of these rookie quarterbacks?
I'm going to have to go with T-Law, Trevor Lawrence. He has a cupcake matchup versus the Texans. You can't really write it up any better for a rookie quarterback. So I have faith in Trevor Lawrence. I know he started the preseason a little slow, but his last showing looked pretty good. And so I expect him to have a pretty solid outing this weekend. Brad, what do you think?
I think it has to be Lawrence against Houston, but I wouldn't be surprised if Zach Wilson had a really nice week against Carolina, because as much as I like a lot of what Carolina's done drafting, this is a very young defense that's still developing. Yeah. And Wilson looked, throughout the preseason, he's looked ready. It doesn't look like it's too big for him. So facing a defense that's young and developing, a young developing quarterback, like it could be, if somebody said he outperformed all of the rookies this week, I wouldn't be surprised.
I agree.
So
yeah, I'm on T-Law as well, and I think he calmed a lot of people down in that last preseason game against Dallas. And I know it may have been the second or third stringer, but it looked like the quarterback that was advertised. I agree 100% on Zach Wilson. I think Mac Jones isn't going to throw the ball enough. To be honest, I think that they grind that one out against the Dolphins. But I heard I was listening to something today, and Carolina is starting, I believe it's 12 of their 13 draft picks from the last 2 seasons. Are the youngest team in the NFL. So that's pretty wild. You don't usually see that much of your draft class 2 years in a row make your 53-man roster. So pretty interesting.
Very true. It is. They are a very young team, but it's a talented defense, but they're going to need time to develop. It's just it's not going to be a quick thing. So I want to throw up a softball to you because I know, Mr. Sullivan, you're all about that tight end action. I know you've done a lot of digging in. Shara over on YouTube says, speaking of Pitts, when's the last time a tight end had a big fantasy rookie season?
Well, the short answer is 2017 with Evan Ingram. 2 tight ends that have been drafted since 2010 have had top 12 tight end seasons. The average, and I don't have it in front of me, I'll try to pull this off the top of my head. The average first round drafted tight end dating back to 2010 has finished as tight end 26 as a rookie and averaged like 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, and nothing. You got to go all the way back to the Ditka's rookie year. He had the most successful rookie year as a tight end in 12-game season. I can't remember what he put up, but I think he scored 12 touchdowns and had about 1,300 yards receiving. So it's few and far between. So that's why I say, as much as I love Kyle Pitts, I definitely am cautiously optimistic about his first season in Atlanta.
So as much as you love Kyle Pitts, Justin wants to know, do you think he can be a top 5 tight end?
Welcome to the Tight End Show, everybody. So just this week, I moved Kyle Pitts down to 6th in my redraft rankings behind Mark Andrews. So my answer is no.
Mr. Leone,
he says, Pitts? Can he be a top 5 tight end? Not will he be. So
you could be.
Yeah, he of course he can be.
Yes.
I also have him 6 with you on my redraft rankings as well. But I know we're talking about past history, tight ends. Kyle Pitts isn't really like a tight end. I mean, you look at the guy, he's built like a wide receiver. So, and he's filling in the shoes of Julio Jones in this offense. So if anyone is going to break this trend of poor tight end performances or rookie season, it's going to be Kyle Pitts. And I expect him to have a really good season. I would confidently have him in my tight end 1 spot, and I really wouldn't think twice about it.
So if you're drafting in a redraft league right now, where are you picking him? Like, when do you start looking to add Kyle Pitts?
I take him after Andrews is off the board. After Andrews is off the board. I would take.
So you and I won't get him then, right?
Well, sometimes Pitts can fall, but typically, yeah, we probably won't get him. I don't think I only have 1 redraft share of him.
Would you take him in round 4?
No, I took my only share of him was in round 5.
Okay, fair. Brad, you want your show back?
I have no interest. So the caveat I want to throw in this equation is Russell Gage. Why is everybody sleeping on this guy? Like, he's got.
I don't think we are.
Well, but everyone's assuming that he's just gonna, Pitts is gonna leap over him and be the next option. I mean, how do we know that Ryan and Pitts have a rapport and have that chemistry build to where when the chips are down and we know they're going to be passing a lot, that he won't just look to Gage or to Ridley and Pitts is, maybe the third option kind of thing? Do we really think that Pitts has leapt up into the conversation as being his number 2 read on any given play?
No, I don't necessarily think that's the case, but I think where Kyle Pitts is potentially lethal is in the red zone. For some reason, Atlanta never threw the football to Julio Jones in the red zone. His entire career in Atlanta, he just was hardly targeted in the red zone. There's a long list of guys that scored touchdowns, receiving touchdowns last year. It was 11 of them, and it was not a great list of people. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but it's the Hayden Hearsts, it's Ridley. Actually, Ridley's not even in the equation. So Hayden Hearst and a bunch of other borderline wide receivers. So this is a bad football team that throws the ball in 16-game seasons 620 plus times. Matt Ryan might throw the ball 680 times this year. So Russell Gage was targeted, I think, 103 times last year. He easily exceeds that. But that's what I see Kyle Pitts potentially getting, is over 100 targets in this offense, and Ridley as well, and all 3 of them. So perhaps people are sleeping on Russell Gage. I don't think you should. I was a big fan of his last year, and I still am this year. I think there's definitely a defined role for him in this offense as well.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. But even if Pitts matches Russell Gage in the tight end spot of your fantasy roster, that's huge. I mean, you don't get tight ends that score that many points. So
It's true.
Just to further that point, I mean, even if he tied him, he's still going to be a top 10 tight end.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
I agree. But if you talk about positional advantage, they yell at you here. So just move on, brother.
All right, let's move on to the next topic.
I'm not much for yelling, but I will move on to Justin, who's got another question about another team of his. He wants our thoughts on this team. Quarterback's Russell Wilson. He's got Kamara. He's got Monty. He's got Diggs. Another Amari Cooper share. We got a Kenny Galladay. He's got some more Pitts. He's got AB. And the flex. And they got Broncos, Greg Zuerlein, and then the bench. You got Connor Gordon, Callaway, Lindsey, Hunter Henry, Trey Lance, and Lions Rook. So it must be Amon-Ra St. Brown. What are we thinking about this team, Mr. Sullivan? How do you feel about it?
I think it's pretty nice. The starters are good. The depth is probably, a little bit questionable, but Russell Wilson, Alvin Kamara, David Montgomery, Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper, you're in it every week with that. If Kyle Pitts is at all what we think he is, Antonio Brown in the flex is really interesting to me because I actually think he could be the Buccaneers' top scoring fantasy wide receiver this year with the way that they spread the football around. Kickers and defenses, those are two good ones. The Broncos have a great schedule to start, so that's a good one to have. But yeah, I think that is a competitive team. It's just got a little bit of, you're hoping for a little bit of lightning in a bottle in those running backs on your bench, but hopefully you only need to plug and play him for bye weeks. But I like it a lot.
Yeah, Justin, this is the type of team where, I wouldn't roster Hunter Henry. Assuming Hunter Henry is pretty comparable to what else is on the waiver wire, this is a roster where I would cut Hunter Henry for Michael Carter or someone with a lot more upside because I have faith in Pitts at my tight end spot. And assuming Hunter Henry is, if Ebron's on the waiver wire, if similar guys are out there anyway, why waste the bench spot for Hunter Henry? That's where you want to get those high upside players. So I just wanted to throw in the 2 cents on that.
This would be a cool league if you got all the Lions rookies. Like, what would you do with them all, Brad?
Well, if we're going to talk IDP, we've got some very relevant IDP rookies on the Lions for sure.
We didn't bring Anthony in here to talk IDP, brother.
We know he's not giving us any value in the IDP conversation.
I got you on kickers though. We can talk kickers.
Yeah, he's a legend.
He is. I'm starting a kicker this week in my fishbowl roster.
So am I.
Give me some Rodrigo Blankenship for the win, baby.
The fishbowl team that has J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers, and Evan Ingram is starting a kicker this week. Yes.
Ugh.
Wow.
Because you need to. So there you go, Justin. Your team is definitely competitive. I'm more concerned after wide receiver 3 down. Galladay, I don't know what I'm really comfortable thinking his ceiling is with the Giants. So you're going to have to kind of play matchups in some of these conversations with some of these guys. So I would definitely be considering churning the back end of your roster if there's some really nice pieces available on the waiver wire. That being said, it never hurts to jump into our Discord and have that conversation. For those of you that are watching this at some point aren't on the Roto Heat Discord, you need to. We have a lot of good conversations and people can ask all sorts of questions like that. So it's free. Join us. Keep the conversation going there. That being said, Fantasy Football Stats Guy wants to know, is Le'Veon Bell a better stash than Ramondre Stevenson? So a practice squad running back who obviously will get to the main roster because they only have 2 healthy running backs right now, who for some reason just couldn't cut it with a very friendly offense in Kansas City, who hasn't been able to cut it in a little bit, basically since leaving Pittsburgh. How do we feel about who's a better stash at this point in time, Mr. Sullivan?
I once wrote an article for rotoheat.com with the title, "Is Le'Veon Bell really that good?" And the answer was no. So I am, obviously, if this is a dynasty league, this is an easy question. It's Ramondre Stevenson. And even in a redraft league, I'd be tempted, but I think in redraft, I'd probably, if I had to stash, I would stash Le'Veon, just because we have seen Belichick redshirt his rookie running backs quite a bit. That's the only reason I would do it. But I think Stevenson is the better talent.
No,
Anthony?
I would roster Stevenson over Bell, even in a
understand that.
redraft league.
I can
Definitely.
understand that.
Yeah, no, I don't want Le'Veon Bell on my roster on a redraft. When we're talking like 6, 7 bench spots, no way. Deep dynasty bench. If you have room for Bell, sure, there's nothing wrong with that. But
Yep,
on these redraft leagues, there's no way.
There you go. So hopefully that answers your question. I wouldn't do it either. I had one dynasty Le'Veon Bell share in the last month that I got rid of, and that was the only one I had left. I have no interest. I don't, even with a Gus injury, I think Tyson really steps up to take the role. I don't see Le'Veon being able to beat out even a guy like that on the roster. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Tyson's amazing, but I think he's a hard worker and is willing to do the dirty work of picking up blocks and doing some of those things you want to do. Plus, he can be a pass catcher out of the backfield, so I'm in no hurry to be picking up Le'Veon Bell. Ramondre Stevenson for the win, baby. All right, so I'm going to butcher this name. Lamario Hargett over on YouTube. I apologize if I butchered your name.
You got it.
Y'all trust Mike Davis for the year. Anthony, how do you feel about him in Atlanta this year?
No, I mean, I'm not trusting him that much. He's kind of in that draft zone where I'm really getting a lot of wide receivers. I'm really kind of fading that whole kind of tier. The last kind of running back I really would want is like Chris Carson. And then everyone else after that, I'm kind of fading myself. So no, I'm not. I think Mike Davis is really just kind of a jag, and he wasn't really efficient with his touches last year. I mean, he filled the shoes well for the first 6 weeks, then he kind of tapered off. So I'm not drafting Mike Davis. I don't believe in any of my 10, 12 leagues I even have one single share of him, and I'm not looking to acquire him myself. Sully, what do you think?
I think he's a good asset for your fantasy team early that you should be looking to sell early as well. And I just pulled up Atlanta's schedule, and it's Philadelphia, Tampa, the Giants, and then the football team in the first 4 weeks. That's a mixed bag of run defenses. I think he has a really nice week against Philadelphia in week 1. He can even score a touchdown. I think the Bucs probably eat him alive in week 2. But Mike Davis, we've never really seen him as the primary running back anywhere. He's filled in times in Seattle, and he's filled in like he did admirably last year for Carolina. But to Anthony's point, he fell off a cliff towards the back part of the season. So I don't trust him for the full season. And I think Wayne Gallman is going to be a heck of a lot more involved in Atlanta than the average fantasy analyst thinks. I think Wayne Gallman is the better back. So I think he eventually takes that role.
That's such a hard. I was a Wayne Gallman guy for a while. I really liked Gallman. I really thought he could turn into something, and he never did. Even in the spurts that he had, he wasn't insanely efficient.
Can he give you what he gave you last year?
I would hope so.
Because he was fantasy relevant last year, right? He scored a bunch of touchdowns and
when
a bunch of RB2 weeks.
When Saquon was out, he was certainly relevant last year. My guess is that they give Mike Davis the first shot to be the guy. Mm-hmm. And I think they stick with him because they paid him at least for a good half a season before they really start to consider, truly giving someone else the bulk of the workload. But in my mind, it doesn't, in a redraft format, Mike Davis, you shouldn't have been having to draft very highly anyway. And if you had to draft him highly, I would have let somebody else draft him and I would look elsewhere. Davis should be okay for part of the season. After that, if you haven't traded him in that window, then you're probably stuck with him. In one league that I needed running back help, I added him onto a trade because I was trying to lock up. I think I was trying to lock up maybe Tevin Coleman and somebody else. So I added him into the conversation and I went for him. But other than that, I don't own any Mike Davis shares. Never been a huge fan. He's always kind of just been a guy, hard worker, certainly a great, capable depth piece of a team, but not somebody who's you're leaning on. But this Atlanta team is about to start a rebuild anyway. So I don't see this being a long-term endeavor. So if you're a dynasty owner, if you're not competing, I would get out from under him ASAP.
Well said.
All right. So Ricky Butts says, what percentage of the times that you start a New England running back are you confident about? Oh, he must have been answering the Ramondre Stevenson conversation. Yeah. I mean,
isn't the answer to that question different though this year than previous years? At least it looks like it is.
it feels like there's not as much competition this year. I mean, it feels like clearly Damian Harris is RB1, and then they can spell him with Stevenson or James White or any of these other backs. But I don't know. What does Mac look like in this offense? Do they trust him to throw the ball more, so maybe James White's more involved?
I don't think
it makes
so.
it even more muddy.
I don't think so, right? Like the Patriots were the third highest rushing team in the league last year, and I think they will be again this year. I think where they trust Mac Jones is he's a more accurate quarterback, and he can place the ball where it needs to be when it needs to be there. But the Patriots just released their number one running back, at least their number one red zone running back. So that's why I like Harris a lot more. I think he's the goal line guy, or maybe Ramondre is, So maybe I just talked myself into not knowing what I'm talking about here as well.
Yeah, but I think the important thing to notate is the draft value. I mean, we're talking Damian Harris typically gets drafted after Mike Davis, and Ramondre Stevenson is like end of the draft type guy. It's not like James White, same thing. So I think it's the risk of them being involved or not involved is really baked into their draft value anyway.
I think it is, but once you get into week 3 and 4 and you're setting your lineup, nobody cares about ADP anymore. So now it's who is the guy on my team that's going to give me the best chance to win. I still think it's Damian Harris, regardless of where you drafted him. But I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Rick has a fair point. I think Harris is good for probably 8 points ish a week. Some weeks he'll add a touchdown in and give you a little bit more, but I don't hate that as kind of the floor. And if you need running back depth and he's your RB2-3, I don't hate it.
PPR, that's terrible.
Well, in PPR, it's not great for sure. It is not great, but it's depending on where your roster's built, it could get you by potentially.
I agree with Rick though. That's a good assessment of him. You just have to hope he falls down in the end zone at least once a week.
Right. The CB wants to know Ramondre or Tyson Williams is a bench stash.
Well, for me, it's Tyson Williams personally. I just think that there's a little bit more clarity in that backfield. I don't trust Lev Bell, so maybe I'm biased. But to Ricky's point, with Ramondre Stevenson, how can you really trust anyone in the Patriots backfield historically? So personally, I'll go with the better offense and the clearer backfield in my eyes with Tyson Williams. Sully?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Tyson Williams as well. As Gus Edwards, after week 7 last season, was RB25 with J.K. Dobbins in the lineup. So Gus Edwards is the number one running back in Baltimore. I think we can all agree on that. And I think Tyson Williams can be a poor man's Gus Edwards, for lack of a better term. When it comes to Ramondre, J.J. Taylor's still there. And like I said at the beginning, Belichick kind of likes to redshirt his freshmen. Well, now he has J.J. Taylor in his sophomore season in the NFL. So perhaps he gets a little bit more run. James White is probably a more effective running back in that backfield with Mac Jones than he would have ever been with Cam Newton. So I think there's still a lot of complexity and layers to that onion. And I really like Ramondre Stevenson. But if he didn't go off the edge for 91 yards in the preseason, would we all be as hyped about him as we are? I don't think so.
No.
Well, and with this smaller preseason sampling size, I mean, it's hard to really thumb through it and find some things. I mean, you kind of have to go with what you saw because this is all you've got, and starters were out, so you were seeing a lot more of the young guys. Once you get to the regular season, you're not going to see nearly as much of these young guys because the starters were rested in most cases because once you played them, they all got hurt. So it'll be interesting to see how this turns out in the end. And remember, this is now going to be different because we're going to see an extra game during the season.
Yes.
We are now moving to a new type of schedule. So how do you guys feel as we look ahead to the 2021-2022 season? What's your guys' thoughts and feelings on, fantasy in an extra game type season? How do you think teams are going to handle this, and how should fantasy owners be prepared to handle this type of change, Anthony?
I personally think teams are going to handle it the same way they always have. They're just going to take one game at a time. I don't think it really changes anything on the fantasy front. I don't think you need to draft more running backs, hoping, or thinking you're going to have injuries, I just think you got to just go with the flow, and I don't really see any real changes on that front. for fantasy, the only thing I hope you guys do is move your playoffs a week back so you're not in the bye weeks or week 15 to 17. Personally, that's the only thing that I think fantasy teams and owners should really be worried about. But maybe you disagree, Sully?
No, I don't. I think perhaps the only thing we're going to see is how teams close games out a little bit differently. So if you're blowing the doors off of, if you're San Francisco and you're blowing the doors off the Lions in week 1, maybe you see more Jalen Hurd and some stuff like that later in the game, and especially the running back position. I think if anything, the Dalvin Cooks of the world and the Christian McCaffreys might see their touches per game come down a little bit just because you want to ensure they're healthy throughout the entire season. But I don't think, as a fantasy manager, I'm not going to do anything differently. I'm just going to still try to put the best lineup on the field that I can every week and hopefully win. And I think that's what NFL teams do too. I just think if you have the ability to rest your starters a little bit earlier, then I think that's what you'll see. That's it for me. What do you think, Brad?
I think Detroit wins week 1.
And that'll be it for tonight, folks. Thanks very much.
No, it's going to be interesting. I don't know that we're going to really truly understand what to make of this probably for a year or two, because I've seen leagues trying to handle this new change all very differently. And I don't know that we've seen the end of it, because we're already hearing rumors that they want to push for only 2 preseason games and they want to add another game in. So I tend to just continue to tell owners that I talk to and answer questions to not overreact to anything. These injuries that you've been seeing, don't overreact to them. The only time that, of all the injuries that happened this offseason, the only time that it pushed me to make a move was when Akers went down for a team that I had that was rebuilding. I didn't need him anyway. I was going to try to trade him. Owner talked to me about trading for him because he had a team ready to compete that he wanted to stash for next year because he thought it worked for him, and he offered me something I couldn't say no to. Like, don't overreact to the injuries. Don't overreact to what they're doing in the league with adding a week. Continue to work your process. If your process is to continue to work your rebuild. Don't sell the farm to try to win now. Just trust your process. And yes, Joss, kneecaps 27, chomping teeth 13. I like it.
I changed my mind. If Jaws says that's the score, that's the score.
27-13, Detroit's winning. That's what I'm hearing. And when Jaws says it, we got to believe it. It'll be an interesting week 1 slate of games, because remember, most of these guys didn't play in the preseason. A lot of the starters didn't play in the preseason. So what does rust do to this? Because some of these guys haven't really been on the field taking hits since last December, last January. So Anthony, going into week 1, is there any of those positions or players that you're concerned with starting that would be fantasy relevant because they haven't played in, live game action for, the better part of 7-8 months potentially?
No one really comes to mind. I mean, like we said earlier, you just have to kind of just, you draft the team you draft, you got to start the players you draft, and you just kind of hope for the best. I mean, like with Barkley, it's like, yeah, it could be a mess. I think Kenny Galladay recently said, hey, we're going to start the season slow.
Yeah, you love saying that, hey? Hey, we're terrible.
Yeah, you don't really hear that coming from one of your star players, but especially one you just brought in. But, I just think you just got to, just hope for the best. You got to start the players you got. And, we saw teams in this preseason start players that we didn't think they should be starting, and they did anyway. J.K. Dobbins comes to mind. So, teams are going to do what they do. There's really not much you can do about it, so just hope for the best. Sully?
I'm not concerned about rust in any way, shape, or form on the offensive side of the football. I'm a little bit concerned on the defensive side of the football, and all you got to do is go back to a year ago where we had no preseason whatsoever, and the offenses came out on fire, and the defenses took a little bit of time to catch up. So the skill player positions, the ones that you want to cheer for in fantasy, I think they'll be fine. I'm not worried about the lack of preseason touches and snaps at all.
Okay, there you go. So over on YouTube, CB wants to know, Bryan Edwards, Raiders wide receiver, worth a stash over Marvin Jones from Jacksonville? So this is obviously a dynasty conversation. Anthony, are you trying to store a piece like Edwards over a guy who's proven like Marvin Jones?
In Dynasty, I would trade Marvin Jones away for Bryan Edwards all day long. In redraft, I'd rather roster Marvin Jones myself. I don't know if you guys disagree with that, Sully.
I don't like Bryan Edwards, to be totally transparent. In Dynasty, though, you absolutely have to take Bryan Edwards because his runway is a lot longer than Marvin Jones. But in a redraft format, it's Marvin Jones to me, and it's not very close at all.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, and how sad is it? A guy who continues to produce, around the 1,000-yard mark every year is valued less than a guy who hasn't really been on the field very often as a pro.
Marvin Jones
is always ignored.
He's been the most underrated wide receiver to ADP for probably the last 5 seasons, and it just never changes. So yeah.
I mean, it's just wild to me. All right. So over on YouTube, Anthony wants to know, with only one team getting a bye, both sides, I think it may have to come down to week 18. Oh no. Okay. So maybe sorry, Anthony, you must be responding to something we were already talking about. It'll be interesting to see how the different leagues handle the playoffs conversation.
Don't play in week 18.
It feels like that's teams used to sit starters in the final week of the season. I definitely see teams benching starters in this final week if they've already locked up a playoff spot.
Agree.
Yeah, we may have more teams resting guys in week 17 and 18 now more frequently than before because you got a longer season. I mean, teams lock things up sooner. So.
Yeah, even if a team's locked into a 3rd seed or something, right? There's no point in running guys out there for to get J.K. Dobbins.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so fantasy football stats wants to know. I went RB, must mean heavy.
Hero.
I went RB hero this week. He's playing hero ball over here.
Yeah.
All right. Will Sermon, Carter, Sony Michel, Pollard, or Tony Jones be RB2 worthy? Or should I trade one of my receivers, Hill, McLaurin, A-Rob, Ayuk, Thielen, Marvin Jones?
Yeah, well, he must have said 0 because he's loaded at wide receiver.
0.
So
not RB heavy. That's 0. Yeah.
RB hero is going with one solid running back and then 0 RB the rest of the way. So if this truly is RB hero, then Sermon, I guess he's looking at as being his stud running back.
Yeah, you're right.
I don't see that.
No.
Myself.
I don't think he may not be showing his RB1. Yeah. See?
Oh, well.
So back to the question.
Yeah.
No, he's asking, will any of these running backs, Sermon, Carter, Sony Michel, Pollard, or Tony Jones, be RB2 worthy? And in my mind, Sony Michel is the clearest path to RB2 worthy because Darrell Henderson can't be trusted by himself. He's already hurt. So he's probably the one that looks like this year specifically he could. I still think he's probably RB3 at best, but could be in that conversation to be your RB2 with Eckler as your RB1, maybe. Sermon needs a Mostert injury. Mostert, they love there. I mean, obviously, Anthony's plugged in, seeing as that's his team, but I would think that Mostert's going to be kind of their guy and they sprinkle in the others. Carter, obviously, is not really ready to take prime time yet. And then Tony Pollard Tony Jones probably gives you more value right now than Pollard or even Carter, which is crazy to think about because nobody even knew his name. Nobody talked about him a month ago.
I don't think Sermon needs an injury myself. I think that he is going to probably be the RB2 that you end up starting, on your team. I think Michelle, like Brad said, is a good RB3 flex, if you have to. I see him and Henderson kind of cannibalizing each other to a certain extent, whereas the 49er offense is very dynamic. And I think let's go back in time. Let's pretend Jeff Wilson never got hurt. If Jeff Wilson never got hurt, Brad, I think you would have said, in order for Sermon to be relevant, he's going to need an injury to either Mostert or Jeff Wilson. Well, we already got that injury to Jeff Wilson. That's why I think Sermon's already going to be relevant. And I don't think I'd feel confident right now just plugging him into my running back 2 spot. I think you kind of have to. But I think he definitely can emerge and even could take that starting job over Mostert.
Okay, there you go. So Lenny wants to know, who's your favorite RB flyer for the second half relevance or dynasty stash? Patterson, Chris Evans, so that'd be Jarrett Patterson of Washington, Chris Evans, Kenneth Gainwell, or Ramondre Stevenson? This is a really good question because you have to start having that conversation about which guys you try to stash for the future if they're available. What are you doing with that back-end roster spot, Mr. Sullivan? Which one of these guys is your appealing name?
Well, for the second half of this season, it is Kenneth Gainwell. Long-term I think it's Patterson, personally.
I love me some Jaret Patterson. What about you,
Me
Mr.
too.
Leone?
I think you're really hoping for an injury for either one of these guys. I think it's possible Kenny Gainwell has some standalone value, even if that doesn't happen, just because he can kind of catch the ball out of the backfield, assuming this is a PPR league. So I guess if it's PPR, I'll go Gainwell. If it's standard, I'd go Stevenson.
There you go. For me, I'm probably leaning Patterson for either way. Yeah, just like Rick. Patterson for both because the guy he's just a producer, man. He did it at Buffalo.
Good.
He made people look silly at Buffalo, and I really liked what I saw in this Washington offense. He's not better than Gibson, so don't get me wrong. I don't think he takes Antonio Gibson's job or anything, but I think that he pushes for playing time probably within the next 2 years at some level because he's really dynamic. I don't know if that means McKissick goes by the wayside, but he could. I mean, McKissick only really became truly relevant last year with Washington. Before that, he had little spots where he was, intriguing, but, I think Patterson's a better overall player.
Rick's last comment is incredibly relevant, that one. He's still learning how to play the position. And I still believe that Washington wants to use Gibson way more in the passing game than they've showed their hand in the preseason. I know everyone's concerned that he's only a 2-down back and what's happening there. I think that's his role as well. And there's a ton of times where Patterson is going to get used a lot, I think.
Oh, so what I'm hearing, the hot take that I just heard is Patterson's taking the RB1 job and Gibson's the new McKissick. That's what I just heard. And I love every second
so
of that.
If you tuned in late, the Lions are beating the Niners. Jaret Patterson is the number 1 running back in Washington. No, I just think that there's some relevance there to him regardless of injury. And I don't mean fantasy relevance, but if you're talking about a stash on your bench for years to come, there's relevance there because J.D. McKissick only has so much time left in this league as a relevant asset, in my opinion.
Absolutely. So that was just fun ribbing y'all.
Wow.
Don't take that as seriousness. And Rick says a good one here. Remember, prior to last year, Gibson only had 77 touches between graduating high school and being drafted.
Isn't that crazy?
And people are typing him up as, the next big thing. So
he's in my top 12.
There you go. So, all right. So last question before we close the show out for the night. This is actually must be a start-sit question. So who are you starting in your flex this week? And this says full point PPR flex, Jamar Chase, Jacoby Myers, Trey Sermon, Josh Jacobs. I think it has to be Josh Jacobs, right?
Yeah.
Like, how is there a conversation where any of these guys become more valuable than Josh Jacobs?
I'm not starting a Raiders running back this week, either one of them. I'm not starting Trey Sermon this week, and I'm not starting Jamar Chase. So I'll go with Jacoby Myers.
No, I mean, I'd go with Josh Jacobs myself. I understand the logic against Baltimore and, worrying about that. But, I mean, you can draft for upside. I'm good with that. I like Jamar Chase, Sermon, good upside. But week 1, you got to get those easy points.
Do you?
For me, it's Josh Jacobs.
Why is week 1 any different than week 7 or 8?
It's not indifferent. I'm just saying when you roll out your starting lineup, you got to get those easy points.
But there are no easy points.
There are easy points when you're the starting running back on a football team compared to.
So what's Josh Jacobs' line in week 1?
Well, he's probably gonna get at least 15 touches.
And what's he gonna turn those 15 touches into?
Probably 90 yards and hopefully a touchdown. And if he catches the ball a few times too, I mean, it's definitely an easy get compared to what you're expecting with Jacoby Myers, rookie quarterback. I mean, no. Mm-mm.
Okay.
So the tough thing for me is I don't know. I just don't know what to expect from some of these young wideouts. So we're talking about Myers, we're talking about Chase, we're talking about all these guys, and Sermon's not even in the conversation. I know Detroit's defense is weak, but I don't see Sermon being relevant to being more playable than Josh Jacobs. For me, I look at who's getting for sure touches. I know Josh Jacobs is going to get more than double-digit carries. I don't know what that turns into, but I don't know that. Can he not get 10 rushing attempts? I mean,
sure, but
rushing attempts and a few pass attempts.
Right, but all Jacoby Myers has to do is catch 4 balls at for 40 yards, and he's already got 80 rushing yards for Jacoby Jacobs.
Potentially, for sure. The tough thing for me is, and in my mind, it was between Josh Jacobs and Jamar Chase, because I know everybody's been concerned about Jamar Chase in the preseason. But those are the two conversations that I'm willing to have about your flex position. I don't know what to make of that Cincinnati offense with Burrow coming back from injury, with him and Chase still getting back on that same page. I just don't know that it even makes sense to say, yeah, play one of these other guys that there are just as many question marks about, when we know that Josh Jacobs is going to get a certain amount of touches.
That's fair. There's zero chance that Jamar Chase is the player that I pick off that list in week 1.
The first thing I'm going to do Monday night.
I love that guy. And I think that people are way, way overreacting. But we had a quarterback coming back early from an injury. We got a rookie wide receiver who's, whether you love him or hate him, has really struggled. And you have 2 way more dependable wide receivers in that offense and a hell of a dependable running back. There's no way I'm starting Jamar Chase in week 1. None.
The first thing I'm going to do now, though, after Monday night is check up to see how many points Josh Jacobs got and how many points Jacoby Myers got.
Well, we can talk about it on Tuesday night. It'll be a fun conversation.
I've already written it down.
All right, so final start-sit question. Who are you starting to the flex? Marvin Jones versus Houston, A-Rob versus L.A. If you say anything other than A-Rob, you're silly. I mean, A-Rob's elite.
Never sit Allen Robinson.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. A-Rob all the way.
And I get the Jalen Ramsey. I get the Jalen Ramsey thing is the reason why you're a little concerned, but don't worry about it.
So there you go. So that is it, people. We are.
Come on back and tell us how we did, CB. I want to know.
Come back next week and you can get us.
Come on, Jacoby.
What I will say is that week 1 is almost upon us. We got 2 nights until we see actual football played between 2 actual teams starting all their starters, and it'll be exciting. For those of you that are watching tonight, thank you guys for hanging out with us. We are live streaming again tomorrow night. It's the redraft show, although tonight you wouldn't have been able to tell the difference because we were answering all sorts of stuff and having lots of conversations, but we're trying to get you ready for week 1. So tomorrow night we'll be doing a lot of the week 1 preparation with you as well. So thank you guys for hanging out with us. Make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification icon. We go live every week. You've seen Rick in the chats here. Rick is our main man. He's the driving force behind this thing, the heartbeat of Roto. He actually is going to be producing a ton of DFS stuff. So you'll want to watch what he's got going on, because he is going to help you make some big buku bucks in the DFS conversations that I will not be. I will be listening on bated breath because he's the man at that. And yeah, so we're done. I appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Anthony, it was a pleasure seeing you as always. And we're going to end with an awesome comment like this. If Jimmy G's at the helm, the Lions might pull it off. Thank you, guys.
Jimmy G's starting record as 49ers quarterback? When did he become garbage all of a sudden?
He's not. In fact, the last time he played him, he threw for over 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. They beat the Lions.
Go. Brad, you can leave. Anthony, just leave it running. Anthony and I'll keep going. We're good.
All right, guys. Thank you as always. We love hanging out and chat with you guys. Tell everybody you love them, and we'll talk to you again next week. See you later.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Also, right there, playlist. Hit it. Watch the videos. Do it. You want